All right, everyone. So if we could possibly take seats. Now, of course, this being right at the end of the conference, we've already got some people who've had to take flights and head off. So that's understandable. And so it looks like I need to squish across a little bit to fit. Yep. Yes, in here. That's Peter there. Yep. Breathe in. So, Randy, you gonna grab a chair behind? Well, why don't you can hover? You can stand behind.
Yeah, okay.
That's just your mate.
So in your laps.
Yeah, just lay down. Got all this room right here.
Okay, yep, that's recording.
It's good for your
Okay.
neck. Good for your neck.
So this is really sort of, this is not all the dev team. Half the audience is dev team. This is a dev conference, right? So really, if we wanted to get all the people who are involved in the development of Archipilot, it'd be the entire audience, or almost the entire audience. But really, this is just a bouncing ideas type session and thinking about what sort of things. I'd particularly like some of the bigger ideas that are going to make a big difference for our user community. And so Randy asked for some suggestions in the chat a little while ago. I put a couple up there, so I might actually just share my screen here and just be aware that this is going to be sharing the Conf 2023 chat, which has been a private chat up to this stage, but I think it's reasonable to now make that more public. So now there we are. So can people see that? And so there are a couple of little ideas for topics that, should we just do them in the order that they came in on there? Any particular reason, Randy, you want to do? All right. So there's one here that Randy and I were discussing this morning, and we were trying to think about this debate about putting code in Lua versus C++. And there is one of the reasons we sometimes decide to put it in C++ is because the barrier to entry for installation is higher for Lua. You have to download the Lua script, you have to set it to scripting, you have to enable scripting, you have to get the right heap size set up, etc., which are steps which for an experienced user is quite manageable, but for a feature that you're aiming to be very available to a wide number of users is a step too far for some cases. And so we had an idea where, inspired by the way we do terrain data management. So by default, we have terrain enable, and the autopilot automatically downloads terrain data tiles, asks the ground station, go and get some terrain data. The ground station goes off to a server, our terrain server, downloads that. And without the user having to worry at all, the only thing the user has to worry about is, oh, pre-arm, we don't have all our terrain data yet, right? So we could do that with Lua scripts. We could actually, for example, the DJI gimbal driver is a good example. So at the moment, the way you do that is you set the gimbal type to scripting, and then you install the right Lua script, reboot, etc. And then within that Lua script, you set a parameter to say the type of gimbal, etc., etc. Okay. If instead in the C++, we actually had an enum for DJI gimbal, but the implementation of that in the C++ is a line in a table that says this ID requires this script, and then that is just like a 3-line implementation in the C++, then the autopilot's job then, when you select that enum, is to check, do we have that script? Is it of the right version? If not, ask the ground station, go and get me that script and supply it. the autopilot code then has to install it and enable it and start scripting and then say all good and we're done. So in other words, we would automate the management of these applets and drivers so that the pain of that installation process is vastly reduced. So that was one idea that we had.
We could essentially add these scripts into the APJ. During the install process, they could be automatically loaded onto the SD card.
They could be, yes, because if we'd assume SD card space is available, it could be preloaded onto the SD card and then a bit like preloading terrain, but that would be quite practical. I did look at the possibility of including them in ROMFS, and I looked, for example, at the DJI gimbal one. It's 33 kilobytes. Now our ROMFS is compressed with GZIP-9 automatically. And so that comes down to, for your particular gimbal driver, Randy, which I'm using as the victim for this idea, it comes down to about 9K. And thinking 9K hasn't really saved us much in the way of flash space versus just implementing it in C++. So I didn't think building it in ROMFS would work, but in the APJ is much more practical as an additional segment in the APJ that then gets with it. The trick is that then the bootloader that interprets that APJ potentially would have to understand the file system, which comes across to Peter's file system.
Or it could be a later step, like
it could be that the ground station understands the parsing of that APJ and downloads. But I think it would work a bit like the terrain data, though. I think it would work quite well, particularly with version management.
Yeah.
Where it would be able to check for new versions, just like Mission Planner currently tells you there is a new version of ArduPilot available. Would you like to upgrade? It would similarly, if you do releases of these scripts, and we have an API, the ground station can ask what the versions of the scripts installed are. If it then informs the user there is a new version of the DJI gimbal driver available, would you like to update?
Or even able to, I don't know, downgrade for some
or go back to an older version. We would need a management page for your scripts, but as much as possible, automate that process so that the enabling of a driver that is in C++ and the enabling of it in Lua becomes a very similar experience. In fact, the same experience for the end user.
Does this get us into an issue with backwards compatibility? I mean, software version.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about backwards compatibility in terms of, software is at this version. You've got drivers that update. It means the process that we use with our testing means now we've got to check these Lua scripts against how many versions.
So Josh Henderson added something into some of the scripts that he created, some of the driver scripts, like the EFI drivers that he worked on, where it had pieces in the Lua to check the ArduPilot version to say what version was required. If we standardize that format, then when the request comes to the ground station, it could say, I need something that's compatible with this version. And it may not give you the latest DJI gimbal driver if it's not compatible, but it might give you the latest one that is marked as being tested and compatible with the version you're running.
That's right. So in other words, it's the versions that have been tested.
Yes. So you would have to mark in the script that this one is compatible with ArduPilot 3.4.1 plus. And
could be just a little description that you have to put in beside every script. So I'm just thinking here that we need to keep the implementation simple. You could just put that in the description just about display to the user. So when they're picking the version of the script that they're interested in, they can read the script and say you must have 4.6 installed.
yeah, some users aren't really aware what ArduPilot version they're running, particularly if they're running a vendor branch, which might show up as, Foo Pilot, whatever, rather than ArduPilot, and they're not necessarily sure what base that was from. Yeah.
script, let's say, for the status.
So the suggestion from Matt there was to automate that with metadata, either in comment form or in Lua form that, you know, tries to automate that versioning. And I think that would be very worthwhile. Yeah.
And in our metadata, we would also need, oh, this script uses X amount of memory. And then we need some fancy error, right? If you try and load 3 or 4 scripts for different things,
Yes.
the total of memory maybe goes over what's available, and we have to
Yes.
say, oh, you've
Not
got
enough memory. Yeah, that's right. You have to have the heap size that is required.
So this seems
Yeah.
like more of a having like metadata for each of the Lua scripts that we
Yeah.
have on board.
Yeah.
At least the applets pretty much like this is how much the requirement is, this is the version it supports and.
Yeah. So it's an idea. I think we don't flesh it out fully at the moment, but I think aiming to make our Lua drivers very, very easy to install is something that's worth discussing further.
For sure.
Just one last comment, maybe Michael wants to say whether or not you could actually implement such a thing.
Hello, yes, I actually think it's a good idea, and I do think the online check conversion is a good idea, the ability to update in place. And just the general way to install. I do agree with 100% with all the metadata though. As a user loads 3 or 4 scripts, the stack size is going to increase. There are many caveats that I can see there, but as long as we think about that and hash that out further into the future, I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, we could prototype it in MapProxy to start with, like we did with the terrain data, and then see how it works. And then, yeah, that also gives us the ability to then test it in CI. Yeah.
I just want to make one comment. We need to have some form of agreed architecture or like process in place if we're going to do this. So that we agree what features go into Lua and what don't, because otherwise it's going to become a mess. So like we need to make sure, because for example, we could say, oh, something has to be like, if something's flight critical, it goes in C. If it's not, it goes in Lua. Otherwise, we're going to have this mishmash of features. Some stuff is Lua, some stuff.
We do have some flight critical drivers now in Lua, and it's sort of based on, you know, number of users, complexity, ability to evolve. There's a whole lot of factors that go into that decision. Even the familiarity of the developer with the tooling. And some of our developers are more comfortable with the idea of creating robust Lua drivers than others. And so I don't think they can really come up with a really firm rule on it.
I mean, what it will give us, because we've got this server, right, that's serving all the scripts, we can tell how many people are using script
Yeah.
X or script Y. And maybe we say, oh, you know, 10,000 people have downloaded this script this month. We've already reserved the gimbal driver enum, right? Perhaps we just move it into C++.
Perhaps not if we're incorporating the APJ, because it's the GCS that knows
Right.
what's going on.
All right, so that's probably enough on that one. The second topic we had was, this came out of a discussion with John Challenger earlier and also the state estimators with Rob Mahoney and Peter Van Gore and Sean Gee. Creating a data corpus for regression testing of state estimators. I'd love to see a repository somewhere with replay logs, preferably replay capable logs, along with some metadata about, you know, a photo of the vehicle would be lovely, and information. So I've actually got a bunch of these logs already. Philip, I suspect you've got a bunch.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know some people don't realise, but we've got drone share back up and running. We would love people to start putting up logs that they're able to share on that. You can do live sharing from your healing, you can do all sorts of stuff. But yes, ask for what you should have before you do logs.
So just to go over that, log underscore replay equals 1. And log underscore disarm, I use option 2, which people may not be aware of, which is that when you hooked up by the USB and you make the RAM changes and things like that, it doesn't bog. But when you connect the battery without the USB, you'll apply it does not. So that's just something that might be useful for some people to be less burdensome. And then we kind of, in some respects, we're more interested in those logs with something that goes wrong. Like, for example, one of Michelle's quadcopter flights with a racing quad with it clips the iron wheel or it drops off the GPS, for example, would be fabulous. And I know we've got other people in this room who have setups that are non-standard, because they're the ones, we get those corner cases, and they're the ones, you know, that tend to push our estimators the hardest.
Although having logs where it went right is also useful, particularly say, for example, the GSF one, we can in replay turn off the compass in the replay and see how it would have performed without a compass.
So we have some specific, I'm thinking about some specific issues that have come up, which we've put in pull request to fix to improve performance.
We should have captured those better for
And
regression.
to those logs, because then
Yeah.
it avoids us falling into the trap where we make an unintended change later on, and then we undo the fix. that we've
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. We have had an attempt at this before. I've had sort of collections of logs, but I just think that creating a bit more infrastructure around that would be very worthwhile. So probably enough. Oh, the log disarmed equals 2. I want to do a log disarmed 3, where what it would do is it would be logging all the time, but it logs to a temporary file, and when you arm, that gets renamed to your log file. And so if you never arm, that file gets overwritten.
Yeah, we actually do have a PR in place which gives us that functionality. This,
Yeah.
hasn't been merged.
There. And that again would be a similar sort of idea, but even quite often you're sitting on, on battery for a long period of time on the ground, and you reboot, you just might as well wipe out that log if you never armed.
Question for the floor.
Yep.
It would be sweet to have the acro flight of the 2 vehicles on the log server, just for users to go play with.
Eventually for your aerobatic flight.
Those ones, oh, sure. Yes, the aerobatic ones, the fixed wing aerobatic stuff. Oh, sure. Those logs are, I actually put up most of my logs on uav.trigil.net, and this initial corpus will probably come a fair bit of it from scraping stuff, but I haven't always had replay on, partly because I haven't, this log disarmed equals 3 is what I want to make it possible to have replay on and log disarmed essentially all the time on all my flights,
Like that.
without ending up with a SD card getting full. And I think it will make if you reboot just before you fly, it'll work really well.
I have a plan to optimize the prediction set of the where it will run it irregularly. So essentially it will only do a prediction immediately prior to using an observation. And logging that would significantly compress log replay.
I might comment that the source data is where most of the size of our logs comes from. At the data abstraction layer, and I don't think that will change that size. But it will reduce the size of the state estimates that are baked in the log.
Right.
Not the source data. And then we've also got the output observer, which runs at the full loop rate. So the most important thing is that source data.
Right.
And then the down.
Yeah.
All right. So the next topic I've got listed here is from Josh Henderson. Hello, Josh, if you're watching. So she's raised the point, should there be some discussion about the usage of foundation funds and status? And there have been various emails about other support folks. James or I, shall we give a bit of a how it works type thing? Are people interested in knowing, how we dispose of your money with trips to the Bahamas and things? Sure, James.
The Bahamas are a long way from here. We're not in Kansas.
So probably stand up there or behind.
No, I'll speak up behind you guys. No.
That might will work.
Yeah, well, so Tom and I are 2/3 of the funding committee. The third wise monkey is
Andy Piper.
Is it
Andy
Andy
Piper?
Piper, yeah, who's probably asleep at the moment, I guess, or about to get up. We could give him a call. No, there's Mike just here.
Yeah, he's based in the UK.
He's based in the UK. So basically, how the RG Pilot funds are managed is for small staff, the normal running, I guess, of the business, so to speak, is managed between the three of us. So things like paying the bills, basically, or small funding proposals that are under $2,000. The three of us just discuss it. Is it a good idea? Not a good idea? And generally, we will form a consensus there. For larger expenditures, such as the budget for this event, we put that out to the full development team and get input, and basically put that to a team vote, where all I guess everyone has who wants to put forward an opinion or a suggestion can do so amongst the dev team.
There are around 50 people in the dev team at the moment who have voting rights.
Yeah. So what Josh is kind of referring to there is that we kicked off a discussion earlier in this year about bringing on an additional, I guess, part-time employee. At the moment, we have 5 of the developers funded part-time by the partners program, providing support to those partners. And there's about 100, or probably slightly over 100 partners at the moment, which is a huge number. And those 5 engineers plus Tridge and Randy and Pete Hall and a couple of others, Bill Guy, who contribute into that partner support program, do a huge amount of work. Because the partners program is, exceeding our expectations, it's wildly successful. We're in a position where we need to bring more people into that. Plus, we have the resources to do that. But we also need to balance that against the broader needs of the project. So RGPilot is, it's a global community endeavor. It's not just about the partners. They're fundamentally important to us, but we also need to not just solve their problems, but set the project up for future success as well. So, does this next person we fund to work through the partners provided funding or partners and donors, there's also, community donors as well that contribute into the pool of funds, is the best use of that ability we've got to bring this new person on? Do we put them into supporting RGPilot's tooling? So the built-in tests, test suite, PyMavLink, all of those things that it's very easy for your general implementer user of RGPilot to just assume exists, even though no one's really funded or sponsored to work on those things. Because it's really hard, I guess, to generate interest from industry in that lower level tooling that's invisible to most people. Do we pay someone to work on that part-time? Do we bring on another partner support engineer? Because the workload for the half dozen or so people that are doing that partner support is growing rapidly. Or do we start looking at other parts of the RGPilot project and start doing more outreach or STEM or business development or marketing or something like that, that might grow the partners program a little bit more so that we can then bring on some more people to provide that support. At the moment, that discussion, there's an open email thread that Josh has kind of referred to in his question there. There's also some separate discussions with myself, Tridge, Randy, and the funding team as to what that might look like. There is a draft proposal and vote that is that some people have contributed to, but we're probably not at a position today to kind of make a decision as to what we want to put forward to the dev team, and then from there put forward to the partners in the broader community. That probably doesn't answer Josh's question completely, but it does give I guess a pretty broad overview of how the funding committee works, and how we're spending that money through the partners program, the support engineers, and what we're looking at doing next.
One thing I'm in favor of too that's been discussed a bit is a little bit more of a marketing presence. Like right now, everything's been done organically, and the engineers are essentially the ones doing the YouTube streams and posts on Twitter and all that. So if that was a bit more managed, intentionally as far as scheduled things and more proper announcements, that I think that has a lot of positive impact.
Yeah, so definitely, I'd love to hear some broader opinions on that. Tom makes a very good point. Engineers are really, really, really bad at marketing. And just managing, that public face of RGPilot, getting not so much the message out there, but letting people be able to see and find, some of the cool stuff that's happening at in a relevant kind of way and as fast as we can get it out there. Yeah, so happy to take feedback, comments, questions, suggestions.
The comment on if we do market, we also have to bolster the support because it will, more exposure we get, the more people will come in and we just prepare for that, that's all, because otherwise.
Yeah.
I-
Scaling,
Sorry, I think that's called good problem to have.
well, yes and no. John. Yes, so, and that's one of the challenges with the success of the Partners Program at the moment, in that program has been wildly successful, but it was based around accessibility. So the barrier to entry on the Partners Program is really quite low. You know, it's $1,000 US, basically pay what you can afford, right? Which is a brilliant model and it's worked brilliantly well for us. But it also means that we're constrained in the resources that it provides us. So with 100 partners, you know, the revenue stream that's bringing in is substantial, but it means that the people that we're employing part-time as partner supporting, whilst they're getting, you know, a stipend, if you like, we're not paying the market rates for that work because we can't afford to do that. So we're basically just saying, who's willing to volunteer some time and will offset the opportunity costs that you're taking on, if you're willing to help us out. And, you know, they get the partner support engineers get the benefit of exposure to real world, real time industrial and enterprise challenges. And we get the benefit of that getting fed back up into upstream RD pilot and minimizing, I guess, the delta between or the fragmentation of, you know, those partners or users from upstream RD pilot. So there's some massive benefits there. But if we grow too quick and people and partners generally join, you know, with a relatively small contribution, and it's not, you know, until the second, third, or kind of when they resubscribe or year after year that they start getting comfortable with the value that that program provides them and therefore to contribute more into it, that we start being able to bring on, you know, more resources into that program.
And we greatly appreciate
Yeah.
so many partners have offered a lot more than the minimum required.
Yeah.
And it is fantastic. We've been able to do so much more in the project because now, in fact, you know, the majority of partners, in fact, contribute significantly above what the minimum required is,
Yeah.
which has been brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also,
I just want to say, well, we've been a partner from the beginning of the Partners Program, the Cube Pilot, probably CNC, Excel sort of as one. I just want to encourage other partners to appreciate the absolutely pathetically small amount of money this is for what you get. The people in this room are donating massive amounts of time. I mean, we employ engineers, we know what engineers cost. You get such amazing value from this team. So yeah, just want to encourage other people that may have a business that relates to Autopilot, they're selling things that they profit through Autopilot, they use Mission Planner, they use all of that. Join Up, it is such a small fee and it's absolute wonderful value for money. One of the things we agreed at the very beginning of the Partners Program is it's not about the partners controlling it or anything like that. It's about showing appreciation for what this awesome team is doing. So
Yeah, and we get a lot back from the partners, not just the financial support. A very large percentage of the new features in each release of Autopilot stems directly from discussions we've had with partners, feedback, issues that they've hit. And because we are the support engineers, but also we are core developers, our natural inclination is to solve problems with code. And so a lot of the new code that comes in comes from somebody says they were having this issue with that device, and we say, let's fix that properly. And that partner benefits, but then that rolls into the next release. And that's what allows it to snowball and really provide benefit to our people. So that feedback process and the quality of the feedback we get we get flight reports with really detailed reports of what the pilot saw, what their expectation was, what the vehicle was doing, the logs, of course. That effort that partners are making in making really high quality reports to us, we greatly appreciate that. It is brilliant, and that is as valuable, in many cases, much more valuable than the financial contribution.
But we do need the financial contribution.
We need both.
Yeah, that, there's been a sort of recent trend where most partners actually want to donate at least a little bit more than what they did last year, which has been really great. And the second thing is that it's been increasingly easier for me to approach partners and, they're not giving me any trouble whatsoever and just wanting to contribute as much as they can. So personal thank you for that. And last bit that I wanted to say was that I raised a proposal for a social media manager. That was, I uploaded a doc and I think everybody agreed that we needed one. And I was holding on to that discussion till this point. So I was wondering if, I should raise that to a vote or not. And I think all of us pretty much agree that that should probably go to a vote now.
Yeah, I might just step back. Trying to avoid being in front of the camera for this. Seems I've failed. Yeah, so what we've drafted to put to the dev team, and I guess we could probably share it if we wanted to.
If I could find it right here, sorry.
But basically, because there's so many things we want to do right now, but we can basically only really, just because I'm quite conservative and it's not my money. Basically, what we're going to put up is basically pick two of these 3 or 4 options, and I can't remember if we put 4 options on the form or not. But that vote form is in draft. It includes that kind of marketing function as one of the options. And basically what we're going to put to the dev team is pick 2 of these. We can't do, they're all of these functions are important. We all agree they should be funded by the project funds, but we can't do them all right now. So let's prioritize them. Let's pick the first 2 up out of the list. And then in 6 months or 12 months, as the partners program keeps moving forward, and as we have basically more money to support the project, then we can continue building on that on the internal support program. So whether that's support engineers, whether that's industry and partner engagement, whether that's social media, whether that's tooling. And there's a few other things that are on that email chain if you go back through it. So we prioritize a couple of those, I guess basically amongst me, Randy and Tridge. We'll socialize that and then put the vote out. And that should happen in the next couple of weeks. We'd hope to do it this weekend. We just didn't quite get there because we all got distracted organising in Japan. Yeah, but yeah, so we don't want to put up that social media manager as a single proposal, just because whenever we put a proposal up that is do this or don't do this, like a binary decision, this dev team, I can only think of one vote that's gone negative in like a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
and I don't want it to be a race between important functions. So we put them all up there collectively, and that forces the dev team to make that decision based on their own priorities.
Yeah, things need to be put together as a budget, not individual things.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to get some topics from the audience about ideas, but there's one more that I thought of that I hadn't put in the list, which is about this conference. So this conference has been in Canberra for all the face-to-face ones for many years now. The previous 3 ones were online. There has been a proposal to break from that tradition and have it in the US. So I'd be interested in how many of the people here in the audience would be comfortable with the idea of a US-based conference next year. Pretty good proportion. Okay, so I think, are we at the stage where we could say that this is pretty likely to go ahead? I haven't heard anything negative about the concept. Tom, would you like to say something about your proposal? We'll probably end up with a team vote on this. We have a process of voting in the team, but there's only one proposal on the table at the moment. And this proposal involves me not being the conference organizer, so I am going to be saying, yes,
You are required to be there though.
I'll come along.
All right. Yeah, so at this is Tom Pittenger from Kraus and Downey Aerospace. We're basically proposing that we're going to host it in Reno, Nevada, in the United States. And it's we have a hangar at Reno Stead Airport, which is just outside Reno, where all the Reno air races are. So if you're familiar with the Red Bull and all those, those crazy planes and contests there. So it's a proper airport. You can see C-130s there and stuff. So it's got like 3 different runway sections to proper airport. And they just built a whole new building with the conference room and whatnot. And they've had some crashes over the years, and it's getting, their insurance is going up, and it's just they've kind of decided that this is the last year that they're going to do the air show. So typically it's every September, mid-September, and they had declared this is the last one. So we put forward to them an idea of the following year, make it start over and do an autonomous drone air show. So let the make it kind of vendor agnostic and whatnot, but STEM oriented and all kinds of stuff. Let vendors come show off their stuff. So it's not just expo where you have a booth, it's an expo where everyone actually flies their stuff. Very, very outdoor oriented event. And so traditionally that's every September. So what I'm thinking is having a 2 weekend or a separated by a week somehow, where the Archer Pilot Conference is beforehand, and it's this sort of format where it's I guess the unconference or whatnot, where it's very developer tech oriented, and then the following week is the larger everyone can come kind of thing for exposition purposes. And the big pluses to it is in the drone industry, there's been lots of I don't say gimmicks, but a lot of vaporware and just people promising more than what they can deliver. It'd be great to actually have it out there where everyone's out there flying it and they can show off what they have and show off what they can do, right? As opposed to just say they can. So but I'm seeing all the kinds of different races and all kinds of different ideas. Right now they have things like the stall stuff, STOL, the short takeoff and landing, where you got some aircraft that how fast can you get off the ground, or how land with how much ground you're touching, used to mount, stuff like that. All kinds of different ideas. So one thing about this airport is it's outside of Reno, about 15-20 minute drive from Reno International Airport, and it is north of Reno, and it's one of the 5 or is it 6 UAS test facilities designated by the FAA, and it hasn't been used a whole lot for that. And UNR, the University of Reno, is the custodian of the COA for that. And so we're in there doing our stuff now, but we're kind of bringing life back to the site for that. So they're really excited about doing all that. So we're actually for these air shows, they close down the whole airspace all around. So I'm not sure how it works for the rules as far as if remote ID is needed or whatnot. But there's going to be TFRs. There's going to be the whole place is going to shut down the airspace all around it, and they do it regularly. They manage all that. The FAA is all on board with doing stuff all the time with them. They have huge sponsors. It's a rather large event, and so we'd be able to piggyback on that, start something new with a large drone exhibition, and then have us sort of kick that off as a developer platform before it, and then maybe hackathon before that, and flies.
We'll see. Yeah,
who knows?
we're still discussing it, but
yeah. So the date's not set yet, but just typically the air show has been every September. So I presume that's the schedule it's going to be, but I'm not sure if I'm sticking to that or not.
Thanks, Tom. So that's what we're thinking about at the moment. If you come here, this time next April, then you may find that we're not here. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I will throw into that next competition in the United States would be to include the flight test guys.
Yeah. We have actually had a few discussions with them, not on this particular topic, but related things. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So that's that's about it. I think we should now open it up to the audience to raise topics. So are there any topics that the audience wants to raise and put this group of, you know, likely looking people on the spot? Robert.
Hi all, Robert Moore. So I know we've had some talks before Tridge, but there have been a substantial growth in the bidirectional signals, so single signal wire, bidirectional signal telemetry systems like servos, ESDs and stuff from Jetty, Powerbox, FreeSky. I know it's as much a hardware as a software issue, so what would be good ideas for trying to bring some of these bidirectional communications online within our pilot potentially for telemetry feedback?
So, yeah, good question. So we actually support quite a lot of bidirectional telemetry, RC bidirectional telemetry systems now. So CRSF and the like, you know, FPort2, and there's a whole bunch of them actually, about half a dozen. There's the people who've done the most work. Andy Piper's done a lot of work on this type of thing. Henry Wurzburg, so we do support a bunch of them already. We tend to add them when two things: when the hardware exists, and B, there is demand. And C, usually we like to have some sort of a specification, but not always. Sometimes we've reverse engineered protocols.
And it happens faster if the developer has the hardware.
That's right. It does tend to happen faster if the developer's got the hardware. So the Yapu, for example, with his, he's got multiple forms. With you're probably familiar with the Yapu telemetry scripts, which are a set of Lua scripts that run on OpenTX-based radios, and it supports multiple different types of bidirectional telemetry happening over RC systems. We also have various one-wire protocols. So like the classic is like the FPort2, which is a one-wire bidirectional. There isn't like a single library that does them all, because each of them tends to use a different methodology. Some of them are framed by timing. Some of them are framed by header markers. There's different techniques for doing these types of protocols, but there already is several of them in RGPilot, maybe half a dozen or so, and we're certainly open to adding more.
I guess maybe this is my ignorance as well, at least from my understanding, it's from the flight computer downlink to the, for example, the FPort2 on FreeSky down to the transmitter. I didn't see in the documentation essentially taking it from, let's just say, for the FreeSky system, an RP25 with the servos back into the cube. So
right.
Is that part there? Is it missing?
We do it, for example, bidirectional D-Shot is an example of that. That's a one-wire system where we get the RPM back, and there's extensions that are happening to that to actually bring more than just RPM on that one-wire system. So where it would actually bring back temperatures and voltages and things at a lower rate.
FETEC one wire as well.
Yeah, the FETEC one wire is another example of that. We don't have the specific one that you've mentioned, but as long as there is a data sheet, then it is implementable, almost certainly. Depending on the data rates, there can be hardware limitations. It might, for example, require DMA in order to be able to get the reliability. Some of them can be bit banged. So we do support some protocols that are bit banged bidirectional. They're much lower data rates, and they're a lot more flexible in terms of what hardware. So there are several examples of that where it's coming back from a device. We don't specifically support the one you're talking about, like the FrSky temperature sensors, the FrSky RPM sensors. I have looked at those in the past, and it is perfectly doable. Particularly now we've got the faster CPU. It is a perfectly doable thing, but it just has to be implemented.
Northwest, welcome.
Oh, good. Any more questions from people from the audience? Or have we worn you out?
I'll just do a quick scan.
Okay. All right, so for later this evening, many of you are going to be catching flights tomorrow. Some, of course, might be, you know, rushing to the airport straight after this talk is finished. But I think most of the people who are flying out today have probably already, you know, gone out to the airport or whatever. For those of you around this evening, I was thinking about possibly going up to the top of Red Hill Lookout and maybe having Turkish pide or something like that up there if people are keen on that. Another possibility is going somewhere like the Carillion, which is a small island in the lake, and again, having takeaway there. Or we could all just disperse and go our own ways or go back to our rooms and sleep, and because we're all exhausted. What are people's thoughts? How many people want to do something social together this evening? We could indeed move on to that if we're done. Any more questions from the YouTube that we're done?
There's a specific question about gimbal roll.
There's a question for Randy. Could the gimbal roll and servo control and range finder with depth we can bind into? That's from John Easton, and might something we perhaps divert into the forum rather than taking this one down.
Well, I think the answer is probably, but need more details.
Great answer.
Tim McLean asks, any thoughts about a mission complex structure approach? There's no more detail on that.
I can't quite pass
Well,
that. Sorry, Tim.
Well, so as far as complex, the jump tags kind of enables that a bit. I've talked with Michael
Okay,
a bunch about
potentially.
that.
Assuming, depending on exactly what Tim
I'm
means. So,
interpreting, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
is added a basic string structure, which doesn't have any parts that.
no, we might need to follow up with Tim
Yeah.
later.
So both John Easton and Tim, please ask those questions in discuss.onlypod.org.
Or on the Discord channel, appropriate one. Yeah.
Yeah, there is
Okay.
one that I want to mention about the jump tags, though. I think that's gonna be a big game change once we.
Speaking of microphone.
Yeah, so there's a new feature called the jump tags that's kind of a big deal. It's gonna allow us to do like submissions and whatnot.
Yeah.
Where you can jump to a mission and not actually know what the index are. Or the indexes, makes it a lot easier to do mission. Complicated things without the script. From the script, without the script actually knowing the mission, it can just kind of jump to a point. So it's tagged in the mission. So look out for some features of that in the future.
Josh Anderson's got a couple of other questions. The larger one is supporting old releases with important bug fixes. So basically backporting.
That's a real chestnut, and it's something that Peter and Randy and myself in particular been discussing about how we manage. There's a technical barrier at the moment with the way our build server works, which we think we can overcome relatively quickly if we lock Peter in a room for a few hours. And many things can be overcome with locking Peter in a room. So as your kids, I'm no doubt would attest. Yeah, we do want to do a better job of getting fixes into older releases. And Josh makes the very valid point on the chat about like 4.2 is only, a bit over a year old. And yet we're already not doing back ports of bug fixes to 4.2. I have in fact created, for example, that recent BD shot bug. There is in fact a back port of that to 4.2, which I've put up on GitHub, but we haven't done it as a new 4.2 release, which can be downloaded via the standard, for example, Mission Planner installation system. I would like to do that, and we're working on the mechanics of convincing our build server to do that. So hopefully you'll see that in the future, we will be able to do those critical bug fixes going back to much older releases than what we can at the moment.
Since you're speaking to the build server, can you make it run faster too?
Yeah, it's already got a pretty beefy CPUs, and we have put a lot of effort actually in making it faster, but we keep expanding the number of flight controllers we're supporting and the number of different builds and things. And so the work it has to do keeps growing at a very high rate. And which is a good problem to have. It's great to see all the new flight controllers and new vendors and things and new targets. But we'll just keep beefing up that build server. All right, so we might actually just now thank our audience, remote audience, and thank you to all the people who've been, staying up late. Shout out to Louis and Craig and Tim and many others who've been providing great feedback and questions on via the live stream. Thank you. And we've already had a lot of views of the live stream recordings we've done, and I'm sure there'll be many more. The videos themselves, the first edited video, many thanks to Louis for volunteering once again to doing the editing of the RGPilot DevConf videos. He's got the first video up there now, which is Paul Riseborough's Techs video is up there now, and he's working hard to get them up. It is quite challenging because Randy and myself have the occasional mistake, well, perhaps more than occasional mistake in the audio recording and things, which gives some frustration for Louis. But and my apologies for stuffing up the first few minutes of Randy's talk, not having the microphone on. That was completely my fault. But please enjoy the videos. They will be appearing, the full set of videos, over the next few days, and hope you enjoy them. So we might say goodbye to our audience. Goodbye, everyone. Again, and so are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, taking off. 3, 2, 1, take off. Go red. Catching up a little bit more slowly. Red, see that? Yes, yes. That's actually much better synchronization, isn't it? Lower the gains on the synchronization. Oh yeah. They should be halfway down the lead. Yeah. It's outside of something. It's gone down. So it actually disarmed. No, it didn't hit the switch. So it disarmed. Now, why did it disarm? That's the disarm reason. I hope it takes the drive. I'll just check the other reboot.
That sounds right.
Attitude 300 seconds. No. Okay. Well, it just disarmed mid-flight. All right. Let's let the other one finish. And then we'll go collect. Now, so I get my boots for this one. How far out is it? I do have the boots here. Yeah, but
Once the flight's finished.
yeah, let's wait for it to finish.
So Andy, I can't help but notice that this is the second plane you'll have landed when Fridge hasn't landed any.
Hasn't landed yet.
Did you notice that as well? Yeah. I never count your chickens. But, there's barrel rolls in here.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Just really hoping it's not our secret.
Could be. If it's RC, then it's mandatory that we should have debriefing. Square loop. Could it actually disarm? I don't know why it disarmed. I could have rearmed. Yes. Yes, I probably could have done a ATF.
No, you could have
I thought about it. Yeah. It's a little bit high, isn't it? Ooh. Thank you. That was just way too high for that landing approach.
All right, let's see if we can find a plan.
All right, so I'll send you